Before my CEO begged me to save the company, he tore 16 years of loyalty to shreds with a 2-minute meeting. Before the investors threatened to pull out, they toasted the visionary who replaced me with a smooth-talking stranger. Before the systems failed, the lawsuits stacked up, and the board turned on each other, I was just another forgotten name crossed off a spreadsheet. I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I just packed my life into a cardboard box and walked away, knowing they'd already lit the fuse themselves. They didn't even have the decency to schedule it at the end of the day. Tuesday, 10:15 a.m., I got a meeting invite from HR, marked urgent. No context. No heads up from my boss. Just a quiet ping on my laptop while I was halfway through solving a network bug that nobody else had even noticed yet. I thought maybe it was about the system upgrades we'd been discussing for months. Maybe they wanted my input. 16 years of service had earned me that much, right? I walked into the conference room and knew immediately. 3 people sitting on one side of the table, a folder sitting dead center. No coffee, no small talk. Just that stiff, uncomfortable silence people wear like armor when they're about to do something cowardly. The head of HR cleared his throat. "We're restructuring." I smiled a little, because of course they were. That word had been floating around for months, growing louder with each new management meeting I wasn't invited to. He kept talking, but I stopped listening after the phrase, "We've decided to go in a new direction." New direction, new blood, new ideas. All the usual excuses. What it boiled down to was simple. I wasn't shiny anymore. After 16 years of building systems from scratch, after creating processes so smooth the new kids barely even knew they existed, after saving their asses more times than I could count, I was legacy. And legacy meant liability. I glanced down at the packet they slid toward me. Severance terms, a few months' salary, a non-disclosure agreement, and a polite reminder to hand over all company assets within 48 hours. My manager, the same one who used to call me at midnight begging for help when the servers went down, wouldn't even meet my eyes. I didn't say a word, didn't argue, didn't ask why. When they told me I was being replaced by a strategic innovation consultant, someone younger, flashier, with fresh ideas and a strong social media presence, I just nodded. The meeting lasted 9 minutes. The aftermath would last a lot longer. I packed my things in a single cardboard box, a few framed photos, a coffee mug, a USB drive the size of my thumb. I took my time. Nobody came over to say goodbye. Funny how fast people move on when they think you're obsolete. As I walked out of the building, I heard someone laughing down the hall, a bright, sharp sound that followed me to the elevator. I hit the button and watched the doors close in front of me, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet certainty humming low and steady in my chest. They thought they were done with me. They had no idea what was coming. The emails started hitting my inbox the same afternoon I turned in my badge. Announcements, introductions, welcome the new era. The new guy's name was Jason, but in every memo it was Jason M, like he was already a brand. Picture attached. Crisp suit, perfect teeth, hair so sharp it could have sliced through the network cables I spent years laying by hand. He was young, mid-30s at most, probably had a TikTok account where he gave motivational speeches in front of a rented Lamborghini. His job title, Strategic Innovation Consultant. Not manager, not director, consultant. A nice way of saying he got all the authority, none of the accountability. He gave his first company-wide address 2 days after I left. Streamline, disrupt, future-proof. Buzzwords stacked on buzzwords until the whole thing sounded like one of those startup commercials that promise to change your life with an app you'll delete in 2 weeks. He talked about cutting waste. He talked about flattening hierarchies. He talked about moving away from dated, inefficient systems, the very systems that kept the company from burning down in the first place. I heard all this secondhand, of course. A few of the old crew still texted me, loyal enough to know what was really happening, but scared enough to keep their heads down. "He's gutting everything," one message read. "Think he even knows what he's doing?" another asked. "I give it 6 months," someone else said. "Tops." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Jason M. made fast friends with the board, bought them coffee, sent them articles about agile methodologies and the future of digital transformation. took selfies at his standing desk with captions like, "Building tomorrow's companies today." Meanwhile, the skeleton crew left behind tried to keep up, tried to make his shiny new ideas work on systems designed to be stable, not trendy. Jason started slashing vendor contracts, cutting maintenance schedules, shifting critical updates onto automated scripts that couldn't tell the difference between a routine reboot and a critical security patch. Efficiency, he called it. Modernization. Progress. I called it what it was. Negligence wrapped in a PowerPoint presentation. But nobody wanted to hear from a guy they'd already decided was past his prime. They had their visionary now, their LinkedIn prodigy, their next big thing. And me? I was just the ghost in the machine, gone, forgotten, and quietly watching the cracks start to form from a distance. They thought I left empty-handed. I let them believe it. No dramatic speeches, no scenes in the lobby, no scorched earth emails sent to all staff. Just a handshake no one really wanted and a badge dropped on the front desk. But while they were busy drafting canned goodbye posts for LinkedIn, I was making moves they wouldn't notice until it was too late. The last 2 weeks before the axe fell, I worked late. Not because anyone asked me to, because I had work to do. Real work. Quiet work. I backed up documentation they didn't even know existed. System maps, network diagrams, admin protocols, the invisible skeleton that held the company upright while they were busy clapping for Jason's TED Talk buzzwords. I pulled my personal scripts from the servers, the ones I'd built over years to automate maintenance, monitor performance, catch security risks before they exploded. They weren't company property. I wrote them on my own time, on my own equipment, because it made my life easier. I just never bragged about it, never asked for credit. And now, they were coming with me. I removed my admin rights from a few buried places, too. Nothing malicious. Just resetting things back to the way they were before I made improvements nobody ever documented. Without me, there'd be no roadmap, no GPS. Just a lot of very panicked faces the first time something glitched, and they had no idea why. The real systems? The ones Jason was so eager to modernize? They weren't out-of-the-box software you could reboot and fix with a YouTube tutorial. They were living organisms, patched, customized, held together with years of experience and careful, deliberate choices no fresh-faced consultant could guess at. By the time I dropped off my laptop and keycard, the invisible threads were already unwinding behind me. Not because I sabotaged anything. I didn't need to. I just stopped holding it all together. Nobody noticed. They shook my hand, told me good luck, promised to keep in touch. I smiled, wished them well, and walked out into the parking lot with a box under my arm and freedom in my pocket. It was a warm afternoon, sun high and a clear blue sky. I stood there for a minute, feeling the weight of it all fall off my shoulders. 16 years of loyalty traded for a few buzzwords and a selfie campaign. I should have been angry, but all I felt was calm. Deep, clear, cold, calm. They thought they'd replace me with something better. I knew better. It started small. A report didn't pull the right numbers one morning. Somewhere in finance, a junior analyst blamed it on user error and manually retyped the data, thinking it was a one-time glitch. No big deal. A few days later, the marketing automation failed to send a scheduled email blast. They blamed the vendor, filed a ticket, told everyone it was under control. Then the HR system locked out half the new hires on onboarding day. No one knew why. No one could fix it without a reset. Jason brushed it off during a meeting, calling it normal growing pains as the company shifted to a more dynamic infrastructure. Dynamic. That was a nice way of saying no one had a clue how anything worked anymore. The custom integrations, the quiet work I spent years refining so departments could share data without bottlenecks, started buckling under the pressure. Little things, tiny cracks. Alarms that used to ping me directly at the first sign of system load issues now just didn't. Server reboots that had once been carefully staggered to avoid downtime were now happening all at once, colliding like traffic accidents at rush hour. Inside the building, Jason kept smiling, kept throwing around words like optimization and efficiency, while the people who actually did the work were getting crushed under an avalanche of preventable problems. I heard about it through back channels, friends who hadn't cut me off completely, whispers from vendors who smelled fear but hadn't been formally told what was going on yet. I don't think the new guy knows the back end was custom built. He said he's standardizing everything, but nothing's standard. Did you know the CRM stopped syncing with the sales database last week? Lost 3 days of data. I didn't say much back, just listened. The cracks were everywhere now, widening by the day. Not because someone was attacking the system, not because anyone sabotaged it, but because they didn't understand what they had. Jason was so focused on painting over the walls with fresh slogans that he never bothered to check if the foundation was still sound. Spoiler, it wasn't. The system wasn't designed for a flashy rollout. It was designed for survival. Resilience. The kind of resilience you can't fake with a PowerPoint deck. From the outside, the company still looked stable. The lights were on. The website worked. Clients were still getting their invoices. But anyone who knew what to look for could feel it. The slow, inevitable sag of a building where the beams had started to rot. They thought they were building the future. All they were really doing was waiting for the first real storm. And when it hit, no innovation consultant in the world was going to save them. The warning signs were all there. Missed deadlines, angry emails, client complaints that used to be rare enough to warrant a team meeting started coming in daily. The minor bugs that Jason had brushed off as normal adjustments had turned into full-blown system failures nobody could patch fast enough. Finance couldn't close their monthly books because the new automation scripts kept losing transaction data. Marketing's customer lists got corrupted, triggering emails that congratulated longtime clients on their first purchase. Sales had to start manually logging leads again because CRM updates kept overwriting entries. Jason kept smiling, kept talking about adapting through turbulence, like he was piloting a rocket ship and not steering a slow, grinding collapse. Meanwhile, the board started asking tougher questions. Why were client satisfaction scores dropping? Why were key accounts suddenly talking about exploring options? Why were renewal contracts stalling for the first time in years? The cracks weren't cracks anymore. They were craters. Jason tried throwing more consultants at the problem. Specialists, analysts, digital transformation architects. None of them understood the systems because none of them had built them. They didn't know that the old stability wasn't just about the tech. It was about the small, invisible fixes made by someone who actually cared enough to anticipate problems before they ever became visible. I watched it happen from a distance. Sometimes I got texts from old coworkers, sometimes from vendors, sometimes from clients who figured out how to reach me on my personal number, asking if I knew someone who could help fix the mess. I didn't answer those calls. Not yet. This was bigger than one broken server. It was bigger than one missed email campaign. The company had built their reputation on reliability, on being the safe choice when everyone else was chasing shiny objects and fast money. Now, they were just another broken promise in a crowded market. The first major client walked 2 months after I left. A big one. The kind that paid on time, every time. The kind that funded entire departments with one signature. They didn't make a scene. Didn't send a scathing letter. They just quietly let their contract expire and moved their business across town. Jason blamed market conditions. The board blamed transitional friction. But everybody else, the people who actually kept the company alive, knew exactly what was happening. The glue was gone, and the cracks were swallowing them whole. Jason didn't panic right away. At first, he did what all good consultants do when the walls start cracking. He blamed the blueprints. Every failure, every glitch, every lost account was pinned on the old systems he'd been hired to replace. Legacy issues, outdated infrastructure, poor documentation from the previous regime. I became a ghost in every meeting he led. He never used my name, but he didn't have to. Every mistake was an invisible arrow pointed at me, the guy who wasn't there to defend himself. He told the board that modernization takes time, that setbacks were expected, that the bigger the mess left behind, the bigger the ultimate success story would be when he cleaned it all up. They nodded along for a while. Investors love a good before and after story. But even the most patient shareholders have a limit. The second major client left at the end of the quarter. Not quietly this time. Emails surfaced, angry ones, legal threats about breach of contract, screenshots of missed service tickets, broken promises written in black and white. The board stopped nodding after that. They started demanding numbers, projections, contingency plans. Jason, for all his charisma, wasn't built for scrutiny. He was built for the honeymoon phase, the shiny launch, the social media buzz, the speeches about disruption. But when it came to grit, to holding the line when everything was falling apart, he was naked. Every time a project delayed, he promised a new system was coming. Every time a department missed a target, he announced a restructuring initiative that would magically fix everything by next quarter. It was a bluff, all of it. There were no new systems coming, no magic upgrades, just layers of broken processes stacked on top of crumbling foundations he barely understood. Words started to leak out. Clients called vendors. Vendors called old employees. The story spread faster than Jason could spin it. The company wasn't evolving. It was bleeding out. I watched it happen without lifting a finger. 16 years of building something that worked. Not flashy, not headline-grabbing, but solid. Traded away for a few buzzwords and a smile. Now the cracks weren't just visible. They were gaping holes you could drive a truck through. And Jason? He was running out of bridges to burn. It didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a whisper. Someone deep in IT, one of the few left who remembered the old days, raised their hand during a board review and said the quiet part out loud. "The systems aren't broken," he said. "They're custom." Silence. Custom. Not legacy. Not outdated. Not obsolete. Custom built, layer by layer, decision by decision, over more than a decade. Built to fit the company's weird corners and messy realities, not some textbook idea of what a business should look like. Jason didn't know how to answer. He stood there with his slide deck full of buzzwords, his marketing metrics, his growth projections, and none of it mattered. Because custom means irreplaceable. Custom means you can't just plug in a new app and pretend it's business as usual. Custom means someone had built a machine with their own hands, tuned it by feel, fixed the little invisible failures that no off-the-shelf consultant would even notice until it was too late. Someone who wasn't there anymore. The board looked at Jason like they were seeing him for the first time, not as a visionary, not as a savior, but as what he really was, a kid playing dress-up in a burning house. Questions started piling up faster than he could answer them. Why had client satisfaction dropped if the systems were supposedly streamlined? Why had revenue dipped if the new infrastructure was so scalable? Why were basic processes, invoicing, onboarding, service support, suddenly so fragile? Jason tried to pivot, blamed vendors, blamed external factors, blamed economic headwinds. But behind the corporate excuses, the truth was obvious to anyone willing to look. You can't rip the heart out of something and expect it to keep beating. The systems weren't failing because they were old. They were failing because the hands that kept them alive had been shoved out the door. And by the time they realized it, the damage wasn't theoretical anymore. It was leaking into revenue reports, lawsuit threats, client terminations. The company wasn't evolving. It was dying. And somewhere out there, they knew, was the only person who could stop the bleeding. The one they'd thrown away without a second thought. The first call didn't come with fireworks. It was a polite email from someone in HR. Not even the head of HR, just a mid-level coordinator I barely remembered. "Hope you're doing well. We're reaching out to see if you might be available for a short freelance consulting opportunity. Flexible schedule, competitive rates. Let's reconnect." No mention of the layoff. No mention of Jason. No hint that the walls were crumbling faster than they could patch them. Just a friendly, casual tap on the shoulder, like we were old friends who had simply drifted apart, and not a company that had tossed me aside like an expired security badge. I read the email once, then again. I didn't answer. I didn't even think about it. I closed my laptop, grabbed a coffee from the shop down the street, and spent the afternoon walking by the river, feeling the sun on my face. The kind of simple peace I hadn't felt in years, back when every Sunday evening came with a pit in my stomach about Monday morning. They thought a little money and a flexible schedule would be enough to bring me back. They thought I was still the same guy who would say yes out of loyalty, out of pride, out of some misplaced sense of responsibility. They didn't understand. When they fired me, they didn't just take my job. They freed me from midnight crisis calls, freed me from budget cuts disguised as strategic pivots, freed me from the kind of quiet disrespect that wears you down year after year until you stop noticing how tired you are. They wanted my help, but they didn't deserve it. And they definitely weren't ready to pay the price it would cost now. I let the email sit there, unopened again, like a voicemail from a number you stopped answering a long time ago. If they really needed me, and they would, they'd have to do a lot better than a friendly offer and a wink. The next move wasn't mine, it was theirs. And the longer they waited, the worse it would get. 2 weeks later, they stopped pretending. This time, it wasn't HR. It was the COO himself. My phone buzzed around 8 p.m., right when the sun was setting, and the last thing I wanted was to hear a familiar voice from my old life. I let it ring twice before I picked up. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual, like we were just catching up. "Got a minute?" I didn't answer right away. Let the silence stretch out. Sometimes silence says more than words. "I won't waste your time," he finally said. "We're looking for someone with, historical knowledge of the systems." Historical knowledge, like I was a relic, a museum exhibit they suddenly realized they needed if they didn't want the whole building to fall apart. He didn't mention Jason, didn't mention the clients who were now threatening to terminate contracts if service issues weren't fixed immediately, didn't mention the vendor relationships that were unraveling, or the lawsuits quietly sliding onto desks labeled urgent. But I knew. I could hear it in his voice, the slight crack under the surface, the desperation he was trying to keep wrapped up in professionalism. He made an offer, triple my old hourly rate, full flexibility, project-based consulting with executive-level access. In other words, please come back. Please fix this. Please don't ask too many questions. I let him finish his pitch. Then I told him I'd think about it. He tried to press, gently at first. Just a quick engagement, no long-term commitments. We'd really value your experience. I thanked him for reaching out, promised nothing, and hung up. I sat there for a while after, watching the last light fade behind the hills. 16 years. Hundreds of late nights. Thousands of problems solved before anyone even knew they existed. And they threw it all away without hesitation, convinced a shiny new face with a LinkedIn following could replace quiet competence. Now they were learning the truth the hard way. Competence doesn't trend. It doesn't get applause. But when it's gone, the world falls apart faster than anyone wants to believe. I could feel it. The shift. They weren't calling to be nice. They weren't calling to fix a few bugs. They were calling because the fire was already out of control, and they finally realized the only guy who knew where the hoses were had left the building a long time ago. The storm was here. And I hadn't even started negotiating yet. It was almost funny, in a way. After all the emails, the secondhand calls, the polite inquiries, it finally happened. The CEO, the same man who had sat across from me months ago and said I was no longer aligned with the company's future, was now calling my personal number, middle of the day, no assistant, no shield. I let it ring twice before I picked up, not out of spite, out of control. Every second he waited was a reminder of who had the leverage now. "Hey," he said, voice tight. "Got a few minutes to talk?" I leaned back in my chair, looking out over the fields behind my house, the air clear and still. I could almost hear the desperation through the line. "I'll be direct," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "We're in a situation. We could really use your expertise to help stabilize things, just temporarily, until we get things back on track." I didn't answer right away. In that silence, everything rewound in my head. 16 years of service, 2 minutes of dismissal, a cardboard box and a handshake. Now, here he was, talking about stabilizing things, like it was a small leak in the roof and not a 5-alarm fire burning through every floor. "I'm not interested in coming back," I said calmly. There was a pause, long enough that I almost smiled. "We're prepared to be flexible," he said carefully. "Name your terms." There it was, the moment I'd been waiting for. I didn't yell, didn't gloat, didn't remind him that loyalty isn't something you can rent by the hour once you've thrown it away. I just told him the truth. If they wanted my help, it would be under a consultant contract, not employee, at 5 times my old hourly rate, with full decision-making authority over all systems without interference, paid up front, in 2-week blocks, non-refundable, no exceptions. And if they hesitated, I'd walk. No hard feelings. Another long pause. "You're serious," he said. "Dead serious," I replied. He said he needed to discuss it with the board. I told him to take his time, but not too much, because the longer they waited, the deeper the hole they'd have to pay me to climb out of. By the end of the call, the terms were clear. I wasn't coming back as their employee. I wasn't coming back to fix their mistakes out of loyalty. I was coming back on my terms, at my price. And they would remember every single day just how expensive it was to underestimate someone who knew what they were really worth. The contract landed in my inbox the next morning. 12 pages, every demand I'd made, in black and white. 5 times my previous hourly rate. 2-week payments, upfront, non-refundable, no performance clauses. Full autonomy over all systems decisions. Direct reporting to the board, not the CEO, not the COO, not Jason. No approvals needed for critical changes. If they wanted me, they wanted everything that came with me. It was ironclad. The kind of agreement you don't offer unless you're out of moves and out of time. I read it twice, slow and careful. There was no hidden language, no fine print waiting to trap me later. They were desperate, and desperate people don't have the luxury of negotiation. I signed it, scanned it, sent it back with a simple message. "Work begins Monday. Have everything ready." No emojis, no smiley faces, no exclamation points. I wasn't coming back to be part of the team. I wasn't coming back to fix their mistakes and pretend everything was fine. I was coming back because they had no choice. And they knew it. Walking into the building that first Monday felt different. I didn't wear a suit, didn't bring a laptop, didn't shake hands with the same people who had turned their backs on me the second it was convenient. I walked straight to the executive floor, flashed my new consultant badge, and took the elevator alone. The conference room was full when I got there. The CEO, the COO, a few board members who looked like they hadn't slept in a week. Jason was there too, sitting stiffly in a chair in the corner, like a kid who knew the principal was about to call his parents. Nobody smiled, nobody clapped, nobody welcomed me back. Good. I dropped the thick project binder onto the table with a heavy thud. "This is the plan," I said. "I'll be in my office. Don't call unless you're ready to listen." And then I left the room without waiting for a response. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had the contract. I had the leverage. And I had something no hotshot consultant could ever replicate, the blueprint that kept this company alive when everything else failed. This time, I wasn't saving them for loyalty. I wasn't saving them because I cared. I was saving them because it suited me. Because they were going to pay for every mistake they made the first time they let me walk out the door. And this time, they'd never forget what it cost to get me back. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. Word got around faster than any memo could travel. The guy they fired was back. But not as an employee, not as a manager, not even as a consultant they could boss around. I was something else now. I was the guy they couldn't control, couldn't rush, couldn't second guess without paying dearly for it. The engineers started slipping into my office late in the day, asking quiet questions, grateful just to have someone who knew what he was doing again. Vendors who had been half an inch from pulling out were suddenly returning my calls. Clients started hearing my name attached to stability initiatives and emergency recovery plans, and contracts that were on the verge of cancellation were suddenly being renegotiated. I didn't brag. I didn't hold grudges. But I also didn't forget. The ones who had smiled while I was being pushed out now went quiet when I passed in the hall. The ones who thought Jason was the future barely made eye contact. Even the CEO kept his distance, careful not to push too hard, careful to remember just how much it cost to get me to pick up the phone. Jason resigned 3 weeks after I came back. Some vague statement about pursuing new opportunities. No party, no cake, no send-off speech. Just a cardboard box and a long walk through the same lobby I'd once walked out of. Poetic. Every day, I rebuilt a little more. Not for them. Not for the executives who saw loyalty as expendable. But for the people who actually made the place worth saving. The junior devs who wanted to learn. The client managers who just wanted the systems to work. The ones who remembered what it felt like when everything ran so smoothly, it was almost invisible. I didn't fix everything overnight. Some damage couldn't be undone. But brick by brick, piece by piece, I rebuilt what mattered. And this time, I built it my way. Clear documentation, training for the next generation, systems that didn't just work, but outlasted the politics swirling above them. I wasn't there to belong anymore. I wasn't there to climb a ladder or beg for a seat at the table. I was there because they needed me, and they'd never forget that again. In the end, the company survived. Not because they found the next big thing, not because they innovated faster than their competitors. It survived because the guy they threw away came back and held it together one last time, for a price. And when I finally left, months later, on my own terms, with my head high and my contract paid in full, I didn't take a box or a handshake. I took something better. I took the last laugh.